pretty awesome. My name is Dr. Mark Merriwether Vorderbruggen. I am the author of Idiot's Guide Foraging, the creator of www.foragingtexas.com, and general, just the kind of the guy that eats things he finds on the ground. I am joined as usual with the ever awesome Merriwether, my daughter, who will be handling all the important stuff of the broadcast so I can just babble at you. Wow. Okay, episode 24. The presentation tonight is a continuation of the edible and medicinal aquatic plants of Texas. We finished freshwater, so tonight we will be starting the coastal water plants. So basically the stuff in the Gulf of Mexico up onto the shore. So again, to start, a few housekeeping things. First off, like I said, most of these plants you can find a great amount of detail on them over at www.foragingtexas.com. Merriwether will be posting links for each of the plants to the website, so you can kind of catch up and learn more there. Tonight's sponsor, once again, Uncommon Bees, the people you need to go to for any bee or bee-related type stuff. Not just honey and beeswax, but a whole line of infused honeys with everything from, I don't even know what all anymore. They keep changing what they offer, but all sorts of different herbal infused honeys. Also the CBD oil infused honey, and then a number of skincare products and just all sorts of amazing stuff. So Uncommon Bees, you can find them at the shop.uncommonbees.com website. Also on Facebook. Hopefully the owner, Kenneth, is watching tonight, and he can jump in and give a shout out for anything going on there. So a huge thanks to Uncommon Bees for tonight's sponsor. I've known these people for years. They're awesome. Any questions at this point, or?
Nope, just one guy said forking weeds.
Forking weeds, yes, in case you are new to to Foraging Texas, we have a secret greeting and a secret handshake. So I need a second hand here. But the secret greeting is forking weeds, and the handshake is three fingers kind of forked together. So you can tell if there's another seedling out there by that. Also for different things, I know the Uncommon Bees last week, forking weeds was a promotional code. I don't know if it's still active, but forking weeds, capital Forking, capital Weeds. Forking weeds, no spaces. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, is there anything? Whoop, do we have a question already?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
I just saw a rattlesnake in front of my house. It slithered into a rock pile. Are there any plants they stay away from?
Okay, rattlesnakes. Not that I can think of. There were a lot of plants that the Native Americans used to treat snake bites. Medicinally proven Western, not that many did anything, but none that were used to keep snakes away that I know of. Well, on with the presentation. As I said, episode 24 of Merriwether's World, we will be talking edible and medicinal plants of the Texas Gulf Coast. So without further ado, let's get on to this. Oops, I need to move over here now. All right, starting with beach morning glory. This is a very common plant. It is in the morning glory family, so it has a very big morning glory picture flowers. I apologize, I do not have a picture of this particular beach morning glory available yet, so the illustration is from an 1800s botanical print book. So it's uncopyrighted, so I was able to use it. The leaves are very distinctive in that they are kind of cleft at the end, so sometimes they refer to it as a goat's foot leaf. So let's talk more about identifying the beech morning glory. First, the leaves are in an alternating pattern. So if you have the stem, they'll kind of zigzag up the stem as opposed to being directly, here, let's use my head. So this is opposed, this is alternating, where they go up like that. The leaves themselves have the pinnate vein. Remember, the pinnate vein is where you have one center vein and then the other veins come off it, like, the vein or the branches of a Christmas tree. The edge is entire, so it is not jagged, it is not toothed. It is lobed, it does have that cleft in it, but the edge itself does not have any serrations or teeth. And then the shape of this leaf, that goat's hoof sort of shape, it's what we call obocordate. So if you really want to get into botanical terms, the leaf, and let me just pop backwards once here, this kind of cloven looking leaf is obocordate. The stem is smooth and round, so no hairs, round in shape, and purple in color, and quite thick. I mean, it can be as thick around as my pinky. These things creep along the dunes right above the high tide line. The flower, it's going to be purple. In this particular picture, it looked more pink, but they can kind of be different shades of purple, from kind of a pink purple to, for lack of a better term, purple purple. But one of the key things is it does have the 5 petals of the morning glory flowers, and kind of that funnel shape. So the big wide petals, they'll be 1.5 inches to 2 inches across, with 5 petals. In the center of each petal will be a darker purple streak. So the main thing is you want to make sure it is purple and not white. At the end of this, I will show you the white one. I actually have pictures of that, and that one is not edible. So 5 petals, purple in color with a darker purple stripe on them. Now, what do you eat on this? Well, a lot of it. First off, the young leaves. You get them when they're younger just because they're more tender when they're younger. As they get older, they become kind of stringy and a bit bitter. But when they're young, they are good. Usually you cook them, partially to soften them up a bit more. And also, whenever you are harvesting anything around water, you want to cook it or otherwise somehow sterilize it, because you don't want to pick up, E. coli or other bacteria that would be bad for you. So cook the leaves, the young leaves. Now, you don't want to eat huge masses of the leaves because it is a mild laxative. So not like a colonoscopy level laxative, but just kind of a, speeds things up a little if you're having some issues. The stem itself is not eaten. The tubers, if you dig it up, the morning glories are actually in the same family as sweet potatoes, or you could say sweet potatoes are in the same family of morning glories. So it does have a somewhat starchy tuber. The tuber itself, though, is a fairly powerful laxative. So it was recommended, really the tuber was only considered a starvation food when there was no other food available. So you can eat the tuber, but just be ready for the end results could be messy. The flower was not eaten, and the seeds were not eaten. So mainly just the young leaves, and in an emergency, the tuber. Now, medicinal, it's kind of interesting. So, did I put the link to the... No, I didn't. Okay, yeah, I don't actually have the beech morning glory up on Foraging Texas yet. But I will add the link to the comments here. Medicinal properties. There's been a lot of interesting stuff going on. Morning glories in general are known to be hotbeds of interesting chemistry. And so in this particular case, the beech morning glory, medicinal properties, I can't really say it very well, but antinociceptive. Basically what that means is a pain blocker. Similar to like a spinal block sort of thing. Now, I'm not saying inject this into your spine. But I'm just saying there has been some research where some of the compounds basically block the transfer of pain signals, usually in the form of a tincture. And so think of it as a fairly potent painkiller, but it may also result in some numbness of, anywhere really. So in general, it's not used that way, except maybe when the zombies come and there's some serious injuries. Anti-inflammatory, so it helps with swelling. Antioxidant, like I said, whenever you see the term antioxidant, think helps reduce the chance of cancers caused by free radical damage to your DNA. And then they've also found there are some compounds that work as a chemotherapy drug enhancer. So given in conjunction with other chemotherapy, it seems to improve the effectiveness of the chemotherapy. Chemotherapy. Hey, that's a neat one. That's like the name of a band. Yeah, so there are certain compounds in the Morning Glory when they found isolated and extracted actually work synergistically with chemotherapy drugs. So most of these properties probably aren't something you're going to be able to really use just at home or on the beach, other than maybe the anti-inflammatory, because in most cases it was like a concentrated, purified version of the chemicals from it. So mainly think of it as antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. Those two properties will remain even if you're just eating the leaves. Okay, any questions? Now there is a 15-second time delay, so when I ask, we have a question.
Are all morning glory tubers edible?
Are all unknown at this time. There are a number of them that are, like sweet potato, the regular sweet potato, the decorative sweet potato vine, those, some of the others. Off the top of my head, I cannot think of any that are poisonous, but there is a large variety of morning glories, and because they are such chemical powerhouses, I am not ready to say all tubers are edible. A large number of them are, but I cannot guarantee all of them are. Anything else?
Thus far, nope, not about morning glories.
Any other questions?
I heard some stories about foraging around SDSU. Can you elaborate? That was perfect.
Yeah. So South Dakota State University, what happened at South Dakota State University stays at South Dakota State University, even though it's been more than 7 years. Moving on to the presentation. Okay, so the beach morning glory, the main thing, the clove-shaped leaves and the purple flower, as opposed to the other common beach morning glory. Oops, and I have the wrong scientific name, but underneath there, the non-edible mimic, the Empomea imperati. So this is another large morning glory, excuse me, that is found all along the Gulf of Mexico coastal beaches. It has a white flower with a kind of a yellowish green center. The leaves, if you can see closely, they are multi-lobed. They will either be 3-lobed or 5-lobed rather than cloven. But there is no record of it being poisonous, but there's also no record of it being edible and no record of anyone that I could find studying it for medicinal properties. So this is one of those mystery morning glories that really there isn't a lot known about it. It does produce a fairly large tuber or tubers, but as far as the edibility, no one has ever really tested. So I won't stop you from eating it. Please let me know what happens, but there's no telling. It could be a powerful laxative. Lord knows what it could do. So Yeah, you want the purple flowered one. You don't want the white flowered one. Just because the white flowered one, like I said, there's no known record of it being eaten. Okay, any questions? If not, moving on to glasswort. This is one of my favorites. Glasswort is a cool, cool, cool looking plant. It almost looks like coral. It doesn't have any traditional leaves or anything. It's just these round, it's almost like little mini cacti. But you can kind of see it here. So it's just a bunch of tubes just stuck together randomly. So the leaves and the stem, it's really hard to tell them apart because they're just round tubes, just jutting off each other and coming off each other. Very similar to a succulent in texture, so not flat or papery or anything like that. It actually feels kind of like a
Personally.
jello-filled balloon, yeah, purslane or any of the succulent sort of things. The stem is smooth and round. It can be green, yellow, red, orange, probably not blue, but all sorts of different colors. Like so if we go back, you can see on the, whoops, on this side. Anyway, you can see there's all sorts of colors going on. So it's not just going to be green. The flowers are very, 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 very tiny, so most people just miss them. They are white in color and fused, so they just look like a tiny little white tube as opposed to the bigger green, red, yellow, orange tubes, but very, very, very tiny. Now, eating them, these I actually eat raw. I know I talk about washing things and so forth. I'll rinse them off with some water. But they're just so dang good that I usually don't wait very much. Probably a case of do as I say, not as I do. But the leaves, the stem are both eaten raw. It's a very salty plant. The glasswort, it's very good at resisting well, it will take up salt, but the salt won't affect the plant. So the plant itself will just have a lot of salt in it, but it's not damaging the plant itself. It's one of the few plants that can really grow in a hypertonic salt solution. But the end result is the plant is very, very salty, but very, very, very good. Think of it almost like a cross between pretzels and celery, really. The roots are not eaten, just take the upper stems. The flowers, you're probably going to eat some accidentally because you're not going to see them if you're eating it. And same with the seeds and the seed pods. They're very, very, very tiny. So most likely you're just going to munch them down without realizing it. Do I have... Okay, let me go back one. As far as medicinal, there really isn't anything medicinal other than replacing salt. So if you are working really, really hard and sweating a lot and losing salt, nibbling on glasswort will help return salt to your system that you would need, that you have lost by sweating. Really good for seasoning food, like in scrambled eggs, wherever you would use salt. Really good there, but even just raw, it has a nice kind of crunch to it. Like I said, imagine pretzels that kind of taste like celery, but very, very salty. If you've eaten purslane, it's kind of like that, but even saltier. So that's glasswort, where it looks like just a bunch of tubes stuck together. As opposed to saltwort, which is more like purslane. It actually has distinctive separate stems and leaves. So the leaves are going to be opposite and they will alternate. So, going back, the leaves will be, the first set will be directly across from each other. The next set will be rotated 90 degrees and they will go up like that. I probably look like a goober, but it's easy to demonstrate it that way. So opposite leaves that alternate up the stem. And they're kind of like succulent paddles. So rather than just being a tuber, they will be kind of broad across their width. So they'll start narrow, broaden out, and then come together again. You can kind of see in the picture here. The stem will be kind of like the glasswort, where it is still going to remain round, hair-free, so smooth, and it's going to be green to green-yellow. And on older plants, the stem can actually be somewhat woody in appearance. The flowers, again, like on the glasswort, are very, very, very tiny, white to yellow, and generally unnoticeable unless you have a magnifying glass or really looking closely at the plant. This forms big mats, especially just above the high tide line. Usually I find the saltwort back a little with the glasswort closer to the water. But like the glasswort, the saltwort, you can eat the leaves and the stem in particular. Usually more the tips of the plant rather than farther down. Because closer to the ground, the stem can get somewhat woody. So if you're, like I said, if you're familiar with purslane, treat it like that. But you want the softer bits. If the stem is looking gray and woody, don't eat it. Stick, just to like the top 2 inches of the plant, and then spread your harvest around. Also, like the glasswort, the saltwort is very, very salty. So eating a lot of it at once will probably make you really thirsty. So usually people will nibble on it or use it to season other foods. And then medicinal, no, okay, yeah. So no real medicinal properties, again, other than salt replacement if you are sweating a lot. All right, any questions on saltwort or glasswort?
Yes.
Oh, good.
So taste-wise, do you prefer saltwort or purslane?
Ooh, I would go with the saltwort. I love salty stuff. Being a really tall guy at 6'5", tall people usually have a problem with low blood pressure to the point when we stand up, vision, it kind of goes out and comes back because just not enough blood is flowing to our brains. It's awesome, by the way. And so I actually kind of have a high salt diet just to actually help get my blood pressure up. But flavor wise, purslane is good, but it's like a salty pretzel versus a really salty pretzel. So I like the glasswort and the saltwort better than the purslane, and I love purslane. Okay, any other questions?
If the question wasn't asked before I logged in, how far inland are we talking?
Okay, so basically we're talking the dunes, from the water up to just above the high tide line. So we aren't talking trees or anything like that. We're not talking plants that you can find elsewhere inland. So really the beaches be the where we're talking. So the beaches, the sandy beaches, and heading into the water. Okay, any other questions?
Not so far.
All right, and back to the presentation. So the next one, you might have noticed a trend here. There are a lot of succulents along the beach. So the next one is sea purslane. This is in the same family as your weed purslane. And it looks like a bigger version of purslane. In particular, the flower is bigger. So let's just walk through identification. So the leaves again are going to be opposite. So on the stem, you'll have the leaves directly across from each other and then alternating as they go up. Succulent in nature, so thick petals, widening out. They're not just going to be a bunch of tubes like the glasswort. So it looks like a really big version of purslane. The stem is smooth and round. It can be green to red in color. The really big difference between the sea purslane and the driveway purslane are the flowers. The flowers of the sea purslane are a very delicate pink in color. And if you look very closely, there will be some stripes occasionally, but they have a big cluster of purple stamen. So the little male parts poking out of the center of the flower, those will be purple in color, as you can see in the picture. And then 5 petals with just a little dab of yellow at the end. That yellow isn't always there, but if you see all the other characteristics and don't see the yellow, don't worry about it. But a lot of the ones I've seen have this little Just the pink fades to a little bit of yellow at the end, but not in all of them. So very, very distinctive. What you eat, you pretty much eat, again, the leaves, and you can eat them raw like purslane. The sea, or yeah, like regular land purslane. The sea purslane is usually going to be up higher, away from the water some, and so generally a bit safer, less likely to be contaminated. The stem is eaten raw, same as purslane. The roots, leave the roots alone. In fact, you don't want to disturb any of these roots. The roots are important in holding all the sand and the dunes together. So if you are in an area along the coast where you can harvest, harvest in a way that does not disturb the roots, does not disturb the sand in general, because you don't want to screw up the roots because they're keeping the beach from washing away. The flower you can eat, and the seeds you can eat. Basically, all parts of this are edible except for the roots. So, like I said, please, please, please leave the roots behind. Okay, yeah, nothing really medicinal about it. Unlike the weed purslane, I have not found anything on the sea purslane talking about omega-3 fatty acids, so I'm not sure if it has it in there or not. I'm still trying to figure that out. But the omega-3 fatty acids, a very high concentration of them in the regular weed land-based purslane, or inland purslane. But as far as the sea purslane, I don't know if they have the omega-3. I have not found any studies that say they do, but I need to look more deeply into it. All right, we're at 8:30, so let's just pop back again. Another shout out to Uncommon Weeds. I'm sorry, Uncommon Bees. It's another one of those weeks where I'm not sleeping because I got lots to do. So Uncommon Bees, Texas-based bee apiary beekeeper with all sorts of amazing bee products, infused honey, raw honey, beeswax candles, personal care, and of course their CBD infused honey. Cosmetics here. Is that working? Why is that not? What do they have this week? Oh, here we go. Okay, yeah, so they have different salves, propolis tincture. Propolis is some really interesting medicinal properties. Lip balm infused with the CBD. Essential oils, a honey lavender CBD soap. Wow. Every time I look at their website, they've added something new and really cool. And I've had the pleasure of going to their facility and seeing the stuff, and it's like a cross between a science lab and a coffee rotisserie. It's just really, really neat. Totally FDA approved and all that. They're quality stuff. Oop. Yep, forking bees. Okay, nah, we don't want to do that. We want to do forking. Let me actually, because that was Tina. Let me just bring this up here. So I gotta say, superfan Tina sent me this amazing set of post-apocalyptic shears. I'm pretty sure I could cut greenbrier tubers apart and then open a beer or gut a moose with these things. So these are awesome. I'm afraid I'm going to cut a finger off, but thank you, Tina. These are, I didn't even know things like this. If you could lift these things are like a pound of stainless steel, like 440C stainless steel. Awesome things. Thank you, Tina. Oh, we have a question?
A couple questions.
Cool.
Okay, so this one is about saltwort, actually. But it says, I require a high salt diet, but I live in the hill country. Can I gather these, saltwort, and store them? And if so, how can I do this?
Okay. Storing saltwort. That's a good question. I don't know. If I were going to do that, I would probably pickle them. Use the pickled okra recipe from the Ball Blue Book of Canning and Preserving. You can get it from the Amazon.com/shop/foraging Texas. I believe it's there. But if you're pickling, you're already putting a bunch of salt in there. So I would just, stick to hill country plants and throw some extra salt in your diet. Purslane will be start showing up soon, and it is a salt accumulator, not to the point, excuse me, of the saltwort and the glasswort, but it does a pretty good job on its own. And so up in the hill country, just go with that. And then you can actually pickle the stems of purslane when they get bigger and store them for later. Okay, any other questions?
What is propolis?
Okay, let me go back to propolis here. So what propolis is, it is the resin-like material made by bees. Uh, Basically, it is bee glue. So not the wax, but the glue that they use to seal everything together. And it's a mixture of enzymes and pollen and nectar and all sorts of other really interesting bioactive compounds. But it is collected from clean, fresh hives when they collect the honey too. You will find deposits of the propolis in the hive, and it is taken. And then the uncommon bees, they make a tincture out of it. So Google it, and you'll learn a lot more. But it is some really, really neat stuff from a medicinal point of view. Anything else?
No.
Caught her. Okay. All right, in that case, let's go back to the presentation. So we talked about saltwort, we talked about sea purslane. Now let's move on to sea rocket. Sea rocket is a wild mustard that grows along the shore. Being a mustard, it is in the broccoli or brassica family. And so think of this as sea mustard. So the leaves are alternating on the stem, so they will zigzag up the stem rather than being directly, opposed. They'll be zigzag. The vein pattern is pinnate, so one center vein and then all the other veins coming off that. It does have a toothed edged or a serrated edge, so not an entire. So it's not a smooth thing. It's bumpy. You can think scalloped edge for those of you who do scrapbooking. And then the edges of the teeth are going to be rounded rather than sharp. The stem, it's smooth, so no hairs, green and round. And then, whoops, that's weird. I don't have a slide for the flower. I'm sorry. So the flower is a traditional mustard flower, so that means 4 petals in either an X shape or kind of spread out more into an H. The petals of this one are yellow. So 4 yellow petals, and then in the center will be 6 stamen. So the little male part sticking up at the center. You'll have flowers, and then you'll also have a bunch of flower buds together in a cluster. So if you've ever looked at broccoli, think a single broccoli floret. That's what the flowers of the sea rocket look like. Do I have it on the... I should have it over on the Foraging Texas website. Hold on. I'm sorry. I don't know why I didn't have that. Oops. Yeah. Hold on one second here. Oh, that didn't work. There. So the color actually looks a bit funky. It's kind of a yellowish white. A lot of times I'll find them more like a butter yellow sort of color. But then the stamen will be definitely yellow, but there will be 6 little stamen there, the little pointy parts. So that is the flower. Oops. Let me go back one more. And then directly above the flower, you can see the unopened flower buds that look like a cluster of broccoli, little unopened flower buds. The flowers and the unopened buds taste like broccoli. So let's talk eating it. So the young leaves, especially when they're younger, you can eat raw, or then you can also cook them up like mustard greens. They have kind of a mustard green sort of flavor. I enjoy a little bit nibbled raw. A lot of them start to get a little too mustardy raw. So, if you're going to eat a bunch of them, cook them. The stem, there's no record of it being eaten, and it is kind of tough, so I don't eat it. But I suspect maybe if you peeled it, it would be better. If you ever had like peeled broccoli stems, it's pretty good. But I haven't had a good chance to really try a nice, good, big sea rocket stem. And like I said, there was no record of the stems being eaten. The flower and flower buds are very tasty. That's probably my favorite part because they taste like broccoli and you can just eat them raw. A little bit of ranch dressing, throw them in salads, all that sort of thing. Really, really good there. And then they also produce these seed pods that you can also eat. And you want to get them when they're still green and small and tender, and just pluck a few off and pop them in your mouth. And they're going to taste like, again, mustard pods, if you will. Kind of like the peppergrass, shepherd's purse, those particular field pennycress, the other wild mustards out there. Okay, yeah. Medicinally, again, I was not able to find any medicinal uses for this. But being a mustard, I would think that there would be something out there because mustards are pretty potent, especially with a lot of different sulfur and some nitrogen atom type based molecules, which usually have some uses. But as far as what I was able to find, there really isn't any Western research that I've found on the sea rocket. So this one, again, it'll be kind of right at the base of sand dunes. You'll find it growing out of like concrete walls, cracked walls, sea walls, things like that. There will be points where it'll be growing like a weed. If you're familiar with mustards in general, like the bastard cabbage that's really kind of invasive across the central and hill country areas, that basically any little bit of soil it can get to, it will grow in. And that's the same with the sea rockets. They don't need, they're not delicate plants. They will pretty much grow wherever they land. All right, any questions?
We got one.
Ooh.
Sea rocket or bastard cabbage for taste?
Overall, I'm going to put the sea rocket just a little bit higher. Again, mainly because it has a little bit of saltiness to it. Growing in the coastal area like that, it has to be good at absorbing salt without hurting itself. That being said, the sea rocket, it's really crucial for the good health of the beach, and so it's better to leave it alone, whereas bastard cabbage is just an invasive weed that is driving out a lot of the native weeds. And personally, I think we should all just have one meal a day with bastard cabbage. Everyone in Texas should get together and just maybe if we all started eating it, we could knock its numbers down some. But it's causing one of the problems that will infest fields, and the bastard cabbage will infest fields and get in the way of harvesting the equipment and screw up the harvest. And when you have that much of it, have a big field of it, unfortunately the farmers are pretty much limited to spraying poison down to get rid of it, which is not a good thing. So if we could all get in there with some forks and knives and just forking weeds, man, let's eat that stuff. Whereas the sea rocket, being crucial for the coastal ecosystem, it's best admired until the zombies come or we enter a Venezuela economic system and are desperate for food. Okay, any other questions?
Nope.
Nope.
Not so far.
All right. Next up, the sargassums is basically the seaweed that washes up on shore. Now, here's the thing. Before we talk about the edible use of the different sargassums, I know in Galveston and probably most places along the Gulf Coast, it is illegal to take the seaweed from the beach because, again, it is so crucial for the overall health of all the other plants on the beach. So think the sargassum, it's not truly a plant, it's algae, big mats of algae. It's like a pre-plant, a very primitive plant. These big mats of algae eventually learned to differentiate into different structures within it, and became what are plants now. But the sargassums, the seaweeds, these are just big clusters of algae. So what happens is they get washed up on the shore, and then they really rapidly decompose. Now the seaweeds, the sargassums, are very rich in minerals. So every time they come ashore, it's like another dose of fertilizer for all the other plants on the shore. And so otherwise, if you don't have the seaweed coming up onto the shore, the wave action and the tides and the rain and all that quickly leach out the water-soluble minerals from the sand. And the sand, once the minerals are gone, the plants can no longer live there. So the beach sand, it needs a constant resupply of minerals, which is what all that stinky, nasty seaweed is doing when it washes up on shore. So like I said, in most places it is illegal to take the seaweed that has washed ashore. That being said, there is a gray area of collecting the seaweed that is still out in the water. So, and it boils down to where the law enforcement officers think you got the seaweed. And if you can convince them, get a video of you picking it up out of the water and throwing it in a cooler or something like that, rather than, taking it off the beach, because you will get fined. If they catch you, if they see you, there's a good chance if you will be fined for taking the seaweed off the beach. Like I said, the water, taking it out of the water itself, is a gray area. And I will tell you right now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a game warden. I'm not a judge. And the only jury I've been on has been on a murder case, which is totally unrelated to seaweed. So, if someone wants to make an issue of you collecting seaweed out of the water and taking it, that is a possibility. So keep that in mind. So it really boils down to, again, think of this as survival food, rather than just something you should add to your daily diet. All right, so that out of the way, let's talk about the seaweed. Like I said, the seaweed that washes up along the Gulf Coast is generally either the Sargassum natans or Sargassum flutans. And the simplest way to tell them apart is if it is very thin and stringy. So the one on my left here, looking at it, I don't know if it'd be your right, but the reddish looking one, don't go by the color, go by the leaf shape. If you see, they're very small and thin. And then the little bulbs, those little balls, are the air bladders that help keep it afloat. And those will usually have some little spikes on them. That is the natans. The flutians is going to have a wider leaf, a broader leaf, and then the little air bubbles are going to be smoother. So, like I said, it is an algae, so technically how you describe a plant doesn't really count, but it's close enough to a plant that we can kind of make it fit here. So the leaves are going to be alternating, so it's not so much a leaf as much as just a mass of algae coming off a different mass of algae. But usually these leaves, and I want to do air quotes, will be alternating on the stem, and they will have a toothed edge. So by increasing the toothiness, you just increase the surface area available to the algae, and so they can get a better transfer of nutrients from the seawater into the seaweed. The stem is going to be round and smooth, no hairs, and there are going to be AirPods on it. Again, with the Nathans being the AirPods will probably have little spikes on them, and the Flutians will be smooth. Now, the other thing to remember about the floating masses of seaweed, sargassums, is usually all sorts of critters are living in it too. Usually little hermit crabs and other shrimp and all sorts of things like that. So if you are collecting sargassums, you are also collecting all those other little critters too. So you want to very thoroughly rinse the stuff if you're going to eat it. Now, since it's really not differentiated other than just in appearance, all parts are edible. Like I said, it is illegal to take from the beach. Collecting from the water is kind of a gray area. Flavor-wise, the sargassums are slightly bitter, not too bad. Usually they'll be chopped up and added to soups and stews. It also has a history of being dried and then just crumbled into powder and being added to food that way. So like a algae or seaweed powder. Really good way of increasing the mineral content of your dishes that way. But really, like I said, all parts are edible. Thoroughly rinse it, get all the little critters off it, make sure there's nothing else in there, and then have at it. Now, medicinally, and the link, actually I did put the link on the sheet, so Merriwether will probably be adding the link here.
The medicinal properties?
Yeah, the medicinal properties algae. There's a bunch of them, different compounds that they found. So painkiller, analgesic, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, neuroprotective. They found consuming large quantities of sargassums have a protective effect against, well, the cultures where they eat a lot of this seem to have a lower incidence of dementia. As far as Alzheimer's is considered slightly different, and there's still some work being done on that. But just the general dementia, it seems to help with that. Antimicrobial, anti-tumor. So it helps prevent growth of tumors, especially after like you've had a cancer surgery and all the tumor has been taken out. They usually keep checking for years afterwards to make sure nothing is growing back. There's been some studies that show the sargassums help prevent return of tumors. It is an immune modulatory, so not so much an immune stimulant, but my understanding, reading the paper on that, is it's more helps the immune system target what's supposed to be targeted and maybe reduces its misfires some. So there's still a lot of work to be done on that, but it looks like it might help with some of the autoimmune diseases, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done on that. But it seems to help the immune system target what it's supposed to target. Now, I just had a thought, because poison ivy is when the rash you get from poison ivy, that's an autoimmune effect, where the oils, the urushiol in poison ivy binds to proteins on the surface of your cells and masks them so that the immune system no longer recognizes your cells as you, and mounts an attack to try and kill those cells. So I wonder if eating sargassums would help with poison ivy attack. This requires study. Interesting. Okay, so anticoagulant, it will help thin blood. Now, if you already have thin blood, or if you're on blood thinners or things like that, then you probably want to avoid it, because you don't want to thin your blood down too much to the point where it just starts leaking out of your capillaries and you die. So if you are on blood thinners, you probably want to avoid the sargassums. It is a hepatoprotective, so that means it protects the blood. Reading the papers on that, I still not quite sure what is going on and just exactly what sort of incidences it helps protect the blood from. My guess is more like, um, things in your blood maybe that are attacking red blood cells, say malaria type microbes. Perhaps it helps with that. But again, it was not a lot of research that's been done on that, just enough. Basically, we said, yeah, it seems to protect the blood. Trying to figure out more as to how. Now, the antiviral thing is pretty cool. So not only does it attack uh, microbes and antimicrobial type stuff, but it seems to have antiviral properties too. I'm not sure if it helps the immune system target viruses or interrupts the production of viruses. Again, a lot of work needs to be done. And then, of course, like I said, the anti-dementia. So I guess same as neuroprotective protective there. So there's been some interesting studies there. Really, this is a plant that's worth studying. Again, plant in air quotes because it's a massive algae. If anything, it's more like lichen than a true plant, but we're going to cover it in plants anyway. So really, 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 really neat plant in that regards. Good thing to know. But again, the laws covering harvesting it get a little iffy. Ooh, were there any questions on seaweed?
Nope.
Oh, hey, hi, Brandon. Good to see you. Brandon is a biology professor. I guess, well, I'm going to call him a biology professor, but he's a lot cooler than just biology than that. But yeah, he's a college professor I've known for years. Cool dude. He has his own blog and website and so forth.
We got to.
We got a question.
Can you make a tincture from this to preserve it or not?
Okay, I assume we're talking sargassums. I think you would be better off drying it and then just adding the dried powder. When you're making a tincture, you are only extracting the alcohol soluble components. And based on the wide variety of components that it has, I'm guessing there's water soluble, there's fat soluble, there's alcohol soluble. So really take the whole thing and just dry it and pound it into a powder and add it to your foods that way. Yes.
How do you prepare sargassum for eating?
Okay. Sargassum. So the traditional ways, it's actually food, especially it was used by a lot of the natives along the Gulf Coast, all along Texas and down through Mexico and over into Florida, all these places. Usually it was dried and pounded into a powder and then added to other things, or just chopped up. And when it's young and tender, if it's soft enough to eat raw, it would be eaten raw. But a lot of times it would also be used just chopped up and added to soups and stews. Think of it again as almost like a spinach or an onion, maybe something that you would add to soups or stews or other food while it's cooking, and eat it that way. It's not big enough to roll like the nori or the dulse that you use to wrap other foods. But usually just be kind of chopped up, cooked, tender eaten raw, or cooked or dried, and the powder added to cooked foods. Anything else?
No more questions.
All right.
Time.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, we have 2 minutes left. Man, the evenings go so quickly. Mm-hmm. It seems like I just started. But wow. So, episode 24 coming to an end here. We only have one plant left. So next week we will talk about the wolfberry. Oops. So you'll have to come up for that. But otherwise, also next week, due to some different discussions online and different news groups, why did I just date myself? Facebook groups and other areas where people talk about foraging, There have been some rather heated discussions about the laws of foraging. So my plan next week is to cover my interpretation of the laws, Texas laws that I feel pertain to foraging based on my own studies, discussion with law enforcement people, uh, things like that. So tune in next week for the legal aspects of foraging. Other than that, anything else? You're on.
Nope.
All right. So, okay. It's easier actually if you come over to my side. You didn't photobomb. Did she photobomb? I didn't know if she photobombed tonight or not. So, it is 9 o'clock. Go spend some time with your family. I'm going to spend time with mine. I have a cookie that I'm
Oh
going to
yeah.
eat. And I will see you all next week.
See you
Bye,
guys.
everybody.
Bye.
Love you.
Love you.
All right. End live video. And.